I would yield as much time as the gentleman from North Carolina, my friend and a member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Bishop, as much time as he wants to use.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To Mr. Jordan's point, we're beset with problems. Two of the most significant are that the producer price index is at 10%. We face a cost environment that is unsustainable and that affects every American's livelihood every time they visit a gas pump or go to the store. We face an employment environment where Americans have been disincentivized to work. Every time I speak to people in my district, well, maybe different in the last couple of weeks in the latest catastrophes we've seen, but certainly until then, the leading concern is the availability of people who are inclined to work in order to fulfill job opportunities. The Judiciary Committee's report on this legislation points out that I and Representative Cliff Bentz from Oregon raised the question about this legislation in the markup that it may prevent employers from regulating hairstyles for workplace safety reasons. If one of the cases involved, I believe, was about long dreadlocks that could become ensnared in machinery on a workplace floor. Let me tell you what the Judiciary Committee's report by the majority says is the answer to that problem. They say that concern is misplaced because under the long-standing burden-shifting scheme applied by courts in Title VII cases, an employer may defeat a discrimination claim by asserting that workplace safety was a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for taking an adverse employment action against an employee, with the burden then shifting to the employee to prove that the asserted reason was a pretext for discrimination. Assuming the employee cannot demonstrate that the employer's assertion of workplace safety was pretextual, the employer would prevail against an employment discrimination claim. How extraordinarily comforting. So if the employee wants to wear dreadlocks and an employer is legitimately concerned for the health and safety of the employee that his scalp might be ripped off by a machine, then the employer can enter into the litigation. And it certainly couldn't be arbitrated. We took care of that yesterday, right on the floor of the House. We got to have litigation. We'll have expensive lawyers. We'll get the complaint filed, the answer filed. Maybe there'll be a motion to dismiss that'll be denied. We'll get into the discovery process. We'll send out the interrogatories and the document requests. We'll ask for the other occasions where somebody's been fired, examine the process and the practices of the employer for the last decade. We'll get some experts in. We've got to have some experts to come in and testify the likelihood that the long dreadlocks are going to get caught in the machinery. We'll have conflicting experts, each on each side. They'll disagree. And then the court will receive a motion for summary judgment, say, is there enough evidence to submit the case to trial? And the judge will have a 130-page opinion that'll examine the burden-shifting scheme and the initial burden, and then the response burden, and the burden shifts to the employee to show pretext. And the inflation rate creeps higher, and the folks willing to enter into jobs seem to be less and less, and the catastrophes keep coming. But this is the top priority. I don't think we need to drive lawsuits between Americans. I think in the main, Americans well understand the rules of the road. As the Judiciary Committee itself reports, courts have generally even recognized that hairstyle, to the extent it's associated with race, as a basis for decisions on employment or the like, is already unlawful. The EEOC's own manual says that discriminating on the basis of, for example, afros is unlawful. Another solution to a problem that doesn't exist in any significant scope in this country, and the result being inflation that gets higher, more supply constriction that drives inflation higher, more animosity and obstacles between employees and employers, between merchants and customers, to drive more lawsuits, to pay more lawyers, to make the quality of life in America so much better. That's where we are. That's where we are today on the floor of the House. I yield back.
The gentleman